At the end of our lives, we all get cut down. So if you try to live your life in a way that gives you control, then that works. If you are strong and healthy and young and successful or something like that. But eventually, we all get leveled because life comes to an end. So if you spend your life trying to be in control, eventually you have to come to terms with reality that you're not. So how do you come to terms with that when you get that bad news that your days are numbered potentially? You know, let's just say you're going along about your business and then you found out, you know, you got cancer or something, you know, whatever it might be. You know, bad news is a shock to anybody, so don't get me wrong. It don't matter who you are. If you get bad news, you're not going to be excited about it. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a permanent crushing blow to your spirit either. If you understand and you're at peace with your mortality on the front side, then finding out that your life is not going to go on forever, that's just telling you something you already know very well. But if you've been lying to yourself thinking that you're going to be like a god, you're going to climb that leaderboard, you're going to be number one, and then you realize, well, shoot, I'm not going to be number one, I'm not going to even exist anymore, then that's a very rough thing, because then you have to come to terms with reality and confront the lies you've been telling yourself, in addition to coming to terms with the reality of the situation that you find yourself in. And some people won't even come to terms with that reality at all, ever. And they will just be angry and blame somebody every step of the way for why their life is being ruined, because they can't make peace with their mortality. It's important for us to invest in things which inspire instead of things which give us control. Not to say we don't want to try to be in control of our lives, but we shouldn't be trying so hard to be in control of other people's lives. We shouldn't be manipulative. And we shouldn't measure our success relative to other people. When you try to be a little bit better every day than you were yesterday, then regardless of how you live, it's not very hard for you to have an enjoyable sense of competition in your life as you compete against your own benchmarks. You're just looking at what you did yesterday and you're trying to do better today. Maybe you have an exercise goal which is low because you haven't been exercising very much. So it's just something simple. 5,000 steps or something. And then you say, okay, how can I up the ante? How can I do better? So then you make it 8,000 instead of 5,000. Well, you don't need to worry about that person that's over there preparing for a marathon. You don't need to say, well, where do I rank on the leaderboard of everybody else? All you need to do is say, how am I doing compared to what I've done in the past? Am I doing better? And the same rules could apply to other things. It could be finances, it could be personal health or fitness, it could be stuff like just working on your attitude and saying, have I been satisfied with the content of my heart today? Have I had a good attitude? Have I been at peace with myself and at peace with other people? And if there's something in my life that I believe I should work on, have I made progress on that to where I could honestly say that I'm in a better place spiritually or in some other way than I was before? And if you do that, then life will be something filled with peace instead of something filled with fruitless competition. You know, I gave a friend of mine a graphic novel for a game that he likes. So I give this graphic novel to this guy, and it's like a collector's edition, right? Like, it's not anything super special. It's just, you know, it's a cool bound book. Anyway, he opens it up, he looks at it. Then he says to me, he says, well, shoot, I guess I probably shouldn't have opened it up and took it out of the package, because then I realized it's a collector's edition and that probably reduces the value. I thought, well, that's kind of a moron thing to say, really, because what is the point of living if you're so determined to place value over function? You're not even going to read that content because you think that maybe taking it out of the package is going to reduce the value. Well, what produces value? That hypothetical value of, would it sell on eBay for a few dollars more 10 years from now, or the actual value that you enjoyed looking at it today? And that leads me to the concept of believing that things have intrinsic value, when the truth is that life has intrinsic value. And things in life are just a currency which we can use to convey and reflect the underlying value of life. It's not the other way around. It's not that things have value and then we live so we can have things. It's that life has value and we use things as a symbol of that value. That's why I would have collectibles in my home or office to remind me of things that are valuable or inspirational or fun, or things or people that I love or cherish. Not because those things have any value, but because those things remind me of something valuable. Inspiration is kind of like the difference between milk and honey. Both of them are nice. Control in life is like milk. It will perhaps taste good. It may even be good for you, but it will go sour very rapidly. Honey, well, honey was found after thousands of years in the tombs of the pharaohs. Still edible. I'm sure the same could not be said of milk. Inspiration is like honey. It'll stay sweet for thousands of years, long after the best milk in the world has just turned into a sour crust. When you put this into the context of the fact that our lives are temporary, our lives are just a little mist that fades away as soon as it's formed, really. It's important for us to understand that inspiration is more important than control. If you really want to change the world, understand that you aren't really going to make a very big difference in the world. Because it's still going to be basically the same world when you leave it as it was when you came into it. The most inspirational and influential people in the world are usually not people who set off to change the world. They're people who just lived their lives, and coincidentally they left a mark that was lasting and enduring. But if we really want to make a difference, if we really want our lives to count for something, and we're going to try to figure out how to do that, you got to look at those old black and white pictures of larger-than-life characters and stories of people who you love and people who you inspire, and you have to ask yourself, what is it that they all have in common? Those people who are still alive in spirit long after they physically died. And I know for me, those are the people not who are known for their personal accomplishments, but people who had a positive impact on how others felt about themselves. When I look at the story of someone like Elvis Presley, who is an imperfect man, in many cases a broken man, but also someone who, through his music, through his artistry, through his way of conveying himself, he made other people feel special about themselves. So it wasn't really just the content of Elvis' songs that made him special. It was that he made other people feel like they were special. And that's what really separates the legendary performers that get remembered forever from the ones that are just good musicians. It's one thing to say, well, that's a good song. It's another thing to feel like the person who made that art is helping you to be more enriched or find value in yourself. And that's a really big difference between being a person obsessed with being in control, obsessed with making the best content, obsessed with climbing a leaderboard, and somebody who genuinely makes other people feel like they're valued. You know, sometimes we wonder, what can we do in life? And we don't listen just for the sake of listening. We listen for the sake of responding. And sometimes you don't need to respond. Sometimes you just need to listen. You just need to let people know that they are valuable enough to you for you to listen to what they have to say, and that you respect them enough to not weigh in with your own 2 cents on everything, to just hear them out and to respect where they're coming from. Sometimes you can't bear other people's burdens. Usually you can't. But you can always listen to them. You can always acknowledge the validity of other people's feelings, even if you don't completely understand them. That leads me to the topic of empathy. I think it's a little bit ties in too. What really is empathy? You know, we hear about it. We're all supposed to care about each other. But what really is empathy? Is it pretending to care? Or is it telling the truth? Is it being upfront? You know, the truth is, if somebody dies, do people really care? To a point. But it's a very limited amount of caring. The truth is, when people die, they get forgotten, generally. People just say too bad, and they'll think about that person for an afternoon or something, and they'll take a moment to pause for a funeral maybe, and then they move on. Because life is all about the living, not the dead. And that's how it should be. When we remember people meaningfully, it's not that we're mourning their death, it's that we're remembering the things which they have done and the things which they have been, which continue to add value to our lives. Like when I listen to my favorite singers and musicians from the 1940s, back when World War II was going, well, I'm not mourning their death. I'm celebrating the value they added to the world with their life. And I'm not doing it out of sympathy. I'm doing it out of tribute. I'm doing it out of a selfish enjoyment of what they were, who they were. But we should live to produce value. That kind of value. Not to be so much mourned when it's time for us to go, but rather to have value that we have produced, which makes our lives worthy of being remembered. I do think a big part of that is about learning how to surrender that obsession with control. Nobody really likes someone who wants to control the narrative all the time. Somebody who's always trying to be competitive. Someone who's always trying to figure out whether they are getting enough value out of a relationship or out of a situation. someone who always turns everything into a numbers game. That's how I feel about games like Age of Empires. I like those real-time strategy games. I like the graphics. I like the idea of building up a base. But what I don't like about those games is that the hardcore players wargame it out to the point where it's basically just a spreadsheet simulator, because they've got it figured out down to the second. They're not just playing the game for enjoyment, they're playing it to climb the leaderboard. And when it's competitive down to the second, trying to figure out the build order, trying to figure out how to optimize your game as much as possible, well, is it really a good experience at that point? Isn't the best experience a little bit more organic, where you're not necessarily on rails, where you're kind of free to just be yourself and enjoy the experience? You know, in life, it's easy to be always chasing something, always on that treadmill, always trying to, check to see whether you're meeting the expectations you have for whatever your standard is of a good life. If you go too far down that path, then you don't actually enjoy life. You don't actually live life, because, it's like that. It's like that guy that wants to keep his precious comic book in the original sealed package. That may be fine, but don't be so busy trying to preserve your dreams that you forget to live. There's no point in protecting something if you're not actually going to get any value out of it. Life should be lived for the experience first. And then all of the other things, the money, the accomplishments, those are just side effects. Immerse yourself in the world. Don't live for the purpose of being a completionist. Wherever you find yourself in life, best of luck to you as always, and thank you for watching.